major changes in the GST law, the e-invoicing concept, return concept, and of course, the most important area also today is the departmental audit, which has already started. We have got notices from various clients in this regard. So today we would like to discuss first the new invoicing, return, and other areas of changes, which will be taken by Mr. Mani. He is associated with us for a long period. We are really grateful to him. Whenever we requested him, without fail, he said yes. He is from Mumbai of Deloitte, and he is the in charge of the entire indirect tax areas. And you can understand Mumbai is an area where all the difficult issues are there. So he will be there today, and he will discuss on the return issues, new changes in the GST law, e-invoicing concept, where are the basic problems, and then I will try to cover up the only departmental audit issues and special audit which we are facing today. So therefore, we would like to discuss those areas, and basically my intention is to really cover how we should get ourselves prepared for the audit. So once you get the notice, and you will have to be ready for the suitable informations so that you can get the audit done properly. In certain cases, like our previous excise and service tax law, there is a special audit provisions in the GST law, and how we should get ourselves ready, that matter I'll be discussing separately. So first I'll be requesting Mani sir to take up the GST, core GST areas, and it is not confined to any specific area, although we have touched upon the major areas like audit, returns, return, invoicing, and other. Wherever he feels comfortable and of course time permits, he can touch upon major relevant areas which we have been facing. We means the clients have been facing arising out of GST implementation. So I request him to touch upon the basic and major issues so that our members are appraised, our members are educated, and those areas he will take around 1 hour 15 minutes, and 45 minutes I'll be discussing basically the audit part. So over to Mani sir to take up the matter further for deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chatterjee. Thank you for inviting me. It is a very different experience to speak to people over a screen, whereas in the past, every time I have spoken for Bengal Chamber has been across the table. And that was, in my opinion, a much more nicer and much more pleasant experience, where you can look at people and talk to people, gauge their reaction, decide who is interested in what and do stuff. But I guess for a few more months, we need to be patient till all of us, get vaccinated.
Sir, before you start, I would request all the participants to please mute yourselves, because there are background noises also. And if you can also keep your video off.
I have also one information to share, my friends. You must be seeing Mr. Mani's deliberations in TV18, NDTV. If someone is called for indirect taxations, it is Mr. Mani. So today you are getting the opportunity to meet him personally, but of course through the online. But it is a great opportunity. I once again say that we are extremely grateful to this gentleman. Whenever we requested, he said only yes. And now over to Mani sir.
Thank you for your kind words, sir. I'm sure I don't deserve all them. You are being very kind to me. But as Sharbani requested, request everyone to keep their phones on mute. If you would like to hear better, you can put your video off also. that will increase your bandwidth and your signal strength. I can't unfortunately turn it on because I have to run a few slides and therefore I have to keep the screen on. But it is a pleasure to talk to everyone, although virtually, and the topic that has been chosen by Mr. Chatterjee and his team is a very relevant topic. So let me just start by sharing my screen so that we do justice to the time that is allotted to us. So Sharbani, I think you'll have to enable participant screen sharing because I have not permitted to share my screen. So you'll have to, I guess, make me a co-host so that I can share my screen.
I've made you the co-host, sir.
Okay, let me try again. Yes, I can now.
Sir.
Okay, I'm just hoping everyone can see the screen now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so let me make it a full screen. Okay, so what we intend discussing over the next, for scheduled to be 1 hour, but now we have 50 minutes, is GST returns, e-invoicing, and related issues. We will be discussing the new returns that are expected in GST. We will be discussing e-invoicing. It is not possible to do justice to returns and e-invoicing without having a look at the kind of reconciliations that have to be made. And some of us on the call would be chartered accountants, some of us would be cost accountants, some of us would be MBAs, but reconciliations are going to play a very key role, which we have been learning since the time we started our education process. I also added a few ITC relevant changes which came up in the last 2 weeks or so. I'm calling them New Year changes on ITC because these are integrally linked to the reconciliations that we end up doing and how we demonstrate all of them in the new returns. So let's get started with the new returns first, and then let us go ahead one by one. So when we look at the new returns, what do we mean by new returns? Some of us would remember that when GST started at that point of time, the objective actually was to ensure that there are 3 returns which are contemplated: a GSTR1, a GSTR2, and a GSTR3. This was the original plan of action when it came to the returns and GST was introduced. GSTR1 was expected to be a sales return, GSTR2 was supposed to be a purchase return, and GSTR3 was to use a combination of the two to generate the final tax return, the tax payable return. This is the manner in which the overall architecture was planned when GST was being envisaged. Subsequent to the introduction of GST, because of some IT challenges that the government had during the initial phase, the GST portal did not work in the manner in which it was envisaged. And therefore, the government had to make a lot of changes initially within the first 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, and introduce a few new additional returns. So for instance, GST 3B, which is something which all of us file month on month, which is today a topical return. So today when somebody says, have you filed your GST return? The person is referring to a 3B return. But 3B was not envisaged when GST started. 3B started out much later in response to the complaint that the GST returns were very, very complicated. So when we look at the modified GST returns, the starting point of what we should remember is we are trying to get back to what was originally envisaged. We are now 3.5 years down the road on GST. We have had a lot of hits and misses on GST. Some things worked well, some things did not work too well. But now we are trying to get back to the original idea of having one supply or sale return, one purchase return, and one return which combines the two to determine what is the tax. This is a fundamental architecture of the new returns, and therefore, I am not using the term new GST returns. Because to me, there isn't much which is new in these returns. It is essentially the same old returns, but modified to suit the current situation. So we start with a GSTR 2B. Now GSTR 2B is a report which says what are the credits which are eligible and what are the credits which are ineligible. There are also additional fields that are planned in the GSTR 2A. it includes the GSTR1 filing date, which is a very relevant date, because if anyone delays filing the GSTR1, then the ability to take a credit basis that GSTR1 also gets delayed. Similarly, what is the GSTR 3B filing status? Is the 3B filed? There are several entities which have managed to file the GSTR 1 in time, but have not filed the GSTR 3B in time. And clearly, the ability to get a credit is a combination of GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B. That's when the other person becomes entitled to a credit. So there are various additional fields that have been added in GSTR 2A, all of which will become very important in times ahead. Linking of GSTR 1 to GSTR 3B is a very central project on which the GSTN is working. The GSTR 1, as we know, includes all the supply invoices. So what are the people to whom I sold goods? What is their GSTN number? What are the HSN numbers of the items provided? What is the SSC code? All that is there in the GSTR 1. And the 3B is my tax payment return. So when I make a payment of the tax, have I paid the right amount of tax after adjusting the input tax credit? That is what we see. Now, armed with the information of GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B, it is technically possible now for the GSTN to do an auto computation of the liability. Because if you know what is the credits an entity is eligible, which is based on their vendor's return, what is the supply part of tax liability that they have, and you compare the two, it is possible to generate a statement which says what is the output tax you're liable to pay. Similarly, when we try to link GSTR 2B with any other document in GST, we come out with very interesting conclusions which tell us what is the credit we are eligible, what is the supply side liability we have, and therefore what amount of tax we need to pay in cash. In addition to this, one more proposed measure which is to be done is that there is a IGST that is paid on import of goods. The IGST payable on import of goods goes into the customs portal called IceGate. And in the past, the IceGate was not integrated with the GSTN portal. But the IGST is also available as a credit in the month in which it is paid to be offset against the supplies that we have made in that month. And therefore, the ITC available on the import of goods is also expected to be auto-populated on the GSTN. So when you look at GSTN, you will be getting a lot of data in that which comes from the vendor side. You will also be getting the import-related data which comes from the IceGate portal. There is a delinking of the CN and DN with the original documents. Now, this again was because it was becoming very problematic for many entities, especially FMCG, pharma, and consumer durables entities, which have several invoices and several DNs and CNs. Very often, the DNs and CNs were issued for a specific period of time and not in respect of particular invoices. And therefore, it is necessary to delink the CN and DN also with the original documents. So when we look at modified GST returns overall, the sense that I get is that GST returns in the past was always termed as a tax-paying document. It is like a return of income that you file in income tax. It is like a transfer pricing report that you file. So this was a statutory document that we need to file month on month. Over a period of time, what seems to be happening is that this statutory return contains several fields of information. Some of those fields of information are already available with the GSTN. And therefore, to the extent the information is available with the GSTN, it would be fed into the return. So over a period of time, we will be seeing more and more of action where from being a statutory or legal document, the GST return becomes an information document. Because my GSTN return gives the GSTN details of all my vendors and my customers. To my customers, I'm their vendor. So at their level again, there is a database that they get in respect of my customers' vendors, which includes me and their customers. And therefore, the value chain, which was sought to be established when GST was introduced. Remember, when GST was introduced, they used to say it's a destination-based consumption tax. So when you have a destination-based consumption tax like GST, from the original movement of the goods, from the raw material, till the time the goods reach the eventual customer, there has to be a documentation trail. Now that is what is proposed to be achieved by the modified GST returns. So whenever you look at returns, whenever you look at the fact that there is a lot of auto population that is going on, there is a lot of information that is coming in, you are required to reconcile various databases with various others. Just bear in mind, from being a statutory document that you got to file by the 20th of the month, over a period of time, the GST returns will become information documents which will provide a lot of information to the government and to the tax authorities about your business, which as originally envisaged was the primary purpose of the GST return. Because if the tax authorities can track your purchase and your sales, they can track your entire business. The moment you make a purchase, assuming you are a reseller, you either got to sell what you bought or you got to show it in stock. There is no third way. You can't say that the stock vanished. Similarly, if you are a manufacturer, when you buy raw material or inputs or intermediaries, you either got to show it in stock or you got to show it in manufactured goods. So the whole purpose of the GST returns is to provide a lot of information to the GSTN and thereby to the tax authorities on what various businesses are doing. So it is more of an information request documentation and less of a return in the coming months. Keep that in mind whenever you work on GST returns. As we move on, I have just put together the modified GST returns. How will it work in terms of process flow? What I said earlier is more in respect of the information flows on what happens. But for any supplier, how does the documentation flow from the supplier to the GSTN, to the e-way bill portal, and finally, how does an e-way bill get generated? How does it go to the recipient and what does the recipient do? That is what I have tried to put together here in the form of a flow diagram. Look at the flow diagram. One of the things that you will realize over here, there are multiple processes which have to be done to generate an invoice now. We will discuss that in a little more of detail 10 minutes from now when we start discussing the e-invoicing portal. But at a broad level, just bear in mind that whenever you generate an e-invoice, there are multiple checks and balances that are being carried out in the background. Some of them are being carried out at your end. You can see that. Some of them may be embedded in your ERP, in your SAP or in your Oracle. Some of them are carried out by the GSTN portal. Some of them are carried out before the IRN are generated and some are carried out after the IRN is generated. Can I just request that everyone keep their phones on mute as Sharvani had originally requested? Thank you. So there are multiple processes that need to be carried out at the back end before an IRN is generated or an e-invoice is generated. And we will discuss a little more of that in 10 minutes or so. Auto population of the e-invoice details into GSTR1 is a landmark change that has happened. And we are going to see more and more of this in future. Some of us may remember that in the past, in VAT of certain states, Maharashtra, for example, or Gujarat, for example. Can I request that people keep their phones on mute?
গত মাসে সিকিউর ব্যাংকিং এ করেছি, এবারে এটা চললে তারপর নেক্সট হচ্ছে এবার বাকি এগুলোতে পুরো করা, যেমন সাপ্লিমেন্টারি কিভাবে ঢুকাবো ওগুলো প্রসেসের সাথে আস্তে আস্তে মডিফাই করবো।
তার মানে গত মাসে কোনো সমস্যা হয়নি? এই যে 4 তারিখে বলছিল একটা কি হয়েছে?
গত 4 তারিখে
হ্যাঁ এই গত
ও ওই একটা দুটো হচ্ছে ধরো হচ্ছে তখন ও রিজেনারেট করে করে নিচ্ছে। একটা দুটো হয়েছে এই মাসে।
Please keep your phone mute.
এই মাসে প্রবলেম হয়নি।
না আমরা তোমাকে কেউ তো লুকিয়ে যাচ্ছে কিনা দেখে নিও,
না না
কারণ অ্যাডমিনিস্ট্রেটর দিয়ে কিন্তু অনেকগুলি রিসেট করা হয়েছে।
হ্যাঁ দুই একটা হয়েছে আমার।
Mr. Datta, I think you are heard.
না সেটা দেখে নেবো আমি তো সেই হিসাবে তো সেদিন ইন্ডিয়াসেও তো বলে দিল তোমাদের ওটা তো সিকিউরিটি হচ্ছে, তাহলে 3 জন মানে একজনই কাজ করবে, সেটাই বলা হয়েছিল না ল্যাপটপে ইনভেস্ট করার সময় বলা হয়েছিল।
Mr. Govind Kumar,
তাহলে এতজন
Sarvani, can you mute everyone from your host section?
I can do that.
Yeah, please do.
Mr. Govind Kumar, you are heard. So please mute yourself.
বুঝলে না সিকিউর ব্যাংকিং হয়েছে এই মাসটা, আমরা দেখে নেবো এই সামনের মাসটা,
Can't be done.
তারপরে একটা কিছু
ঠিক আছে,
আর দেখে নিচ্ছি। তুমি যেরকম বলছো অনেকগুলো অ্যাডমিনিস্ট্রেটর দিয়ে, তাহলে আমি ওর সাথে কথা বলছি।
আপনাকে দিয়েছে ওটা অরিন্দম?
Sarvani, you mute.
It has been. Sir, you unmute yourself. Mani sir.
Thanks, Sarvani. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So the auto population of e-invoice details into GSTR1 is one of the most fundamental changes that we have seen in a long, long time. Now, it is very essential that all of us are clear in terms of what this means, because over a period of time, our ability to take credits will get influenced by what kind of vendors we deal with. Right now, we have a facility where, in addition to the auto population of details, we can add details of supplies made. We can modify some of the details. We need not take credit, etc. But going forward, possibly 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, we will have a situation where the credit that we take in a month will depend on 2 factors: whether the vendor has filed his GSTR1 in time, and whether the vendor has made the payment of his tax and filed GSTR3B in time. So the vendor's indirect tax behavior will determine what amount of credits we are entitled to. And therefore, if we deal with a set of vendors who are not regular in uploading their returns, or who don't regularly pay their tax, or who are fly-by-night in nature, more than the vendor, we will get impacted because we won't be able to take the credit. So the effort here seems to be to ensure that all of us deal with vendors who do not pose any systemic risk to the GSTN as a whole. Because if each person takes a credit of someone else's invoice where that other person has not paid, it becomes very difficult for the tax authorities to detect that. So going forward, the auto population of e-invoice details, which is going to come into GSTR1, lot of places it has started happening. Last month also they did one more pilot in respect of certain large taxpayers. But on an ongoing basis, we will be permitted to take data and take input tax credit, not on the basis of what invoices we have received, what goods we have received. In addition, it has to be on the GSTN, and unless the vendor has both filed his GSTR1, GSTR3B and paid the tax in time, only then we become eligible for the credit. Some of you would remember that in one of the sessions that we did for Bengal Chamber again in 2017, some 3 months before GST came, we had mentioned that when you go into the GSTN, when you look at the portal for ITC, you would be able to see data which would be in red, green, and amber. Green means you can take a credit, red means you can take a credit, and amber means you can take a credit subject to conditions. That is what we are headed to now, 3.5 years down the line on GST. Possibly by the time GST is 4 years old, this will be a very perfected system. I just want to touch upon for 1 minute in respect of the QRMP scheme, which has come into effect from 1st of January 21. At a broad level, this is essentially in respect of taxpayers having aggregate turnover up to 5 crores only. And the threshold criteria is a GSTN and is based on distinct percents. But for people who are in this bucket of up to 5 crores, this is a very good system where you can pay a tax on a month-to-month basis, but you are permitted to file your returns on a quarterly basis. There is a migration option. There is an option where you need to elect in terms of when you would like to go in for this scheme. And once you go in for this scheme for that quarter, you have to be under this scheme. You can only change it in the next quarter. So this particular scheme does not seem to have received the requisite degree of attention, because there would be a lot of vendors with whom we deal with who would be impacted by the scheme. So if you are dealing with a small vendor who is below 5 crores, and this particular vendor has not opted for the QRMP scheme, it is quite possible that in the next month you can't take a credit of what he has done because he has not filed his return. If you advise and guide the vendor to say that, look, pay your tax on a monthly basis, but you need to do your return filing only on a quarterly basis, it is good for him because his compliance burden will go down. It is very good for you because as far as you are concerned, you will continue getting the credits, although he's filing returns once in a quarter. That is the reason why I thought I will highlight the QRMP scheme.
It has been done, sir. You can start.
Okay, thanks, Sharvani, and sorry for the trouble.
No, I understand.
Okay, so the QRMP scheme does not have any late fee even for the first 2 months for delay in payment of tax. So for the first 2 months, even if there is a delay, the vendor does not need to, worry. And the vendor can elect to opt for the scheme 1 month before the beginning of the quarter. So if the vendor wants to opt for the scheme from the quarter of April 21, he can elect to do that from end of February itself, and then he will be on the scheme from 1st of April. So just remember to popularize this with all your vendors, those who are below in the 5 crore category. Now, moving on to e-invoicing. We have to bear in mind that GST also has led to a large problem in respect of fake invoices and related complications. And therefore, I thought we will touch upon fake invoices and the related complications before we start discussing e-invoicing. And I have just 2 slides on that. When we talk about fake invoice, what exactly are we saying? So are we saying that the invoice is fake? Essentially, what we are saying is that the invoice is one where there has been no supply of goods or provision of services. That is what is termed as a fake invoice. In GST, fake invoice became a little simple because in the initial part of GST, to encourage people to voluntarily register, the registration process was simplified significantly. And therefore, it just required people to do an online registration on a portal, and the registration was deemed to be granted within a couple of days. While people have largely been compliant, there has also been a section of people who have tried to game the entire GST system. And many of you would have read reports about various people being arrested, various people being sent to jail. Some of the offenses are non-cognizable, non-bailable offenses, etc. What I want to focus upon is some of the measures that the government has taken to curb fake invoices. Because bear in mind that if you deal with vendors who are suspected to have issued fake invoices, the loss is entirely yours. While all the people who are attending this session are possibly law-abiding and compliant, and none of you, I'm sure, would be issuing fake invoices. If you deal with a vendor who is issuing fake invoices, equally you get impacted. That is why this becomes very important for all of us. So the government tracks movement of goods through the e-way bill. And in the e-way bill, as all of you will remember, there are distance limits which are placed, time limits which are placed for goods to move, the PIN code is tracked, and there are various methods by which they can check whether an e-way bill has got converted to an invoice, and whether that is reflected in the GSTR1. Similarly, the ITC reconciliation with GSTR 2A and 2B is one more method for the GSTN to track whether there are fake invoices. Introduction of e-invoicing is the biggest step to check the menace of fake invoicing. Because in the past, what used to happen is that prior to e-invoicing, when an invoice gets generated, the invoice is reported to the government portal only after a time interval. So if I am raising an invoice on 1st of January 21, I need to report it on the government portal only on 10th of February. So I have a 40-day leeway to do whatever I want to do. That leeway is now gone, because in e-invoicing, all that I'm doing is, if I'm issuing an invoice at 4:37 p.m. on 20th of January, at 4:38 p.m., the government knows that I've issued the invoice. And they not only know the fact that I've issued an invoice, they know where the goods are destined, what is the GSTN of the recipient, what goods are being carried or what service is being provided, what is the HSN of those goods, what is the value of those goods. All the data is available to them within 30 seconds of my generating that invoice. All this has led to a situation where whenever the government suspects that there is a fake invoicing, they have been taking two punitive actions. One is to cancel or suspend the GST registration immediately. And if the GST registration is cancelled or suspended, you cannot generate an e-invoice, you cannot issue an e-way bill. Similarly, blocking of the electronic credit ledger, which permits you to utilize the input tax credit against your tax liability, is also resorted to whenever they suspect you issuing a fake invoice or dealing with someone who is issuing a fake invoice. There is a provisional attachment of property, including bank account, that we have seen in a few cases. This has not become very widespread, but possibly if the evasion continues, this will again become widespread. GST fake invoicing is recognized as a cognizable and non-bailable offense. Many of you would have seen that sometime back, some of us in the accounting fraternity were up in arms when there were a lot of newspaper articles on how various people from our profession were being taken behind bars. And we felt that the reputation of the institute was being maligned. But nevertheless, some of those people are still in prison. And that indicates the seriousness of the offense. Many cases, especially service providers, have been granted a lot of refunds after introduction of GST. And when people were granted refunds, many of them thought either for supply of goods, export of goods, or for export of services, many of them thought that since we have got the refund, the whole matter stands closed. What they have started doing after detecting fake invoicing is to scrutinize all the refunds issued since 2017. And wherever they are feeling that there was inadmissible refunds granted in the past, they are trying to withdraw those refunds even now. The GST authorities are also collaborating actively with the income tax authorities. So they have access to the traces database of the income tax department. They have access to the income tax return, because if an entity is reporting a certain number as their top line for income tax, logically that should be the top line, maybe with a few adjustments for the GST return also. And now, as we speak in January, the GST authorities have the annual returns for two periods with them. They have the 17-18 annual return and the 18-19 annual return, both 9 and 9C available with them. And if they compare the 9 with the income tax return, it will be very clear in terms of what has been the reporting in the income tax return and what has been reporting in the GST annual return. So that is why this is one more measure that they have taken, essentially in order to ensure that people pay the right kind of tax. Finally, the GST authorities have become very sophisticated. They have taken the help of external agencies in building a data analytics portal. So they are categorizing taxpayers on the basis of risk. Certain taxpayers are termed as high-risk taxpayers, depending on the industry in which they operate. Certain taxpayers are termed as high-risk taxpayers, depending on their past GST behavior. Certain taxpayers are termed as high-risk taxpayers, depending on the vendors that they deal with. Many of you would have also come across a list that was circulated by the GST authorities around a month and a half back, which put together a list of approximately 7,900 suspicious entities. So these were the people whom the GST authorities felt were not paying the right kind of tax, or where they needed to investigate more. They have put this entire list in the public domain. And they have said, whenever you deal with a vendor, check that the person is not in that list. Incidentally, when you go through that list, you actually see a lot of reputed corporates also on that list. How they got into that list, I'm not sure, but they should take some steps to ensure that they're removed from that list as well. Moving on to e-invoicing now, which we wanted to discuss in a bit of detail. When e-invoicing was proposed and when e-invoicing was initially launched, there were a lot of glitches which happened on the site. And a lot of people were skeptical when it was introduced in October on whether the site would work, whether it would crash, what kind of difficulties people would face, etc. So I have just put together a few statistics which indicates that it is not a point of view any longer on whether e-invoicing is working or it is not working. E-invoice seems to be working fairly well. If you look at the difference in the table at the bottom, on 1st of October, we had 8.4 lakh invoices which got issued, e-invoices which got issued from the portal. And when you look at the number of IRNs generated on 31st October, which is the same month, 30 days later, it has shot up significantly and it is able to handle that load. What is also a little surprising is when e-invoicing was introduced, they had introduced an offline utility for people to use from the beginning. And many people felt that a lot of companies will go in for the offline utility. Number one, because it is very cheap. You don't have to pay anything for the offline utility. Number two, it is something which is very simple. You can use the offline utility and download it and convert it to an Excel as well. But surprisingly, the statistics seems to indicate that in the first tranche of companies that have gone into e-invoicing, only 15% are using the offline utility. 85% have integrated that with their SAP. Could be PeopleSoft, could be Oracle, could be SAP, but most people seems to have integrated the e-invoicing data and the e-invoicing generation portal together with their current ERP. And that is really, really surprising. E-invoicing applicability, as we all know, from 1st of October when it was introduced, it was for companies which were above 500 crores. There were a lot of people who were predicting that the next timeline, which was 1st January 21, would get extended. There were a lot of noises around it, but the government seems to have stuck to that, and it has been rolled out for people having a top line in excess of 100 crores from 1st January. The next segment, which is all taxpayers, is 1st April 21. Now, will this happen? Will this not happen? I can see a lot of noises in media where people say that people are lobbying with government to see whether it will happen or not. I have my doubts, and my feeling is that it could possibly happen. Because as I said before, this is a very good tax evasion prevention tool for the government. And in a situation where the tax revenues are under a lot of pressure, this is not something that they want to relax or they want to compromise upon. Rather, they would go ahead with it, possibly with some more kind of segregation. It's quite possible that they will do 10 crore and above from 1st of April and then come to 5 crore and above or something of that kind. But e-invoicing largely, as we have seen, is here to stay. Now, what does e-invoicing cover? It covers invoices, it covers debit notes, it covers credit notes. What are the transactions covered? It includes supply to registered persons, supplies to SCZ, deemed exports and exports. So overall, when we look at e-invoicing applicability, if you are already covered by this and you have been dealing with it, get prepared to deal with this more and more. More important is, please speak to all your vendors and ensure that they are prepared from 1st April. Because as I said earlier, our ability to get good input tax credits will depend on how we deal with our vendors. And unless all our vendors are prepared, we will get impacted, because then we will have to make a larger cash payment in respect of the liability from 1st April onwards. There is clearly a change which is required to the billing system. In some companies, they have integrated it. In some companies, it works as a patch to the existing system. In some companies, they are using an offline utility. Some of them are also using tools which are available in the marketplace. There is now a need to print a QR code and an IRN on an e-invoice. And without the QR code and IRN, it just won't work. Going forward, as we understand it, the QR code will actually be scanned only, and the IRN also may stop working at some point of time. It may be more of QR code and less of IRN in future. When you receive a QR code from a vendor, remember to review it. Don't take it at sight. Have some mechanism, have some software, and a lot of it is available in the marketplace to check whether the QR code provided is genuine or whether it is the subject of an ingenuine invoice. There is a need to reconcile the invoices on a regular basis which appear on the IRP portal with your sales register. So whenever you are making a sales, whenever you are making a purchase, remember to do a two-way reconciliation with what appears in the government database with what appears in your internal ERP. So how will the futuristic approach for e-invoicing work? What exactly is expected to happen in future? Based on the experience in various other countries, the e-invoicing would actually become a very fundamental document. And possibly at some point of time in future, it could be 6 months, it could be a year, 2 years. Even when you go and have a B2C transaction, when you go to a local pharmacy shop to buy medicines, and you buy medicines for 700 rupees, the so-called bill that you get today, at some point of time in future, even that will come with a QR code. And QR code is going to be made mandatory, possibly earlier, for segments like consumer durables, where you have a high ticket value for each item that is sold. Gradually, it will go down. And maybe at some point of time in future, when you go someplace and you have a Coke, even the bill for the Coke will come with a QR code. So QR codes and e-invoicing are here to stay. And therefore, it is in our interest to ensure two things. Number one, is the supplier issuing the e-invoice when he's required to raise it? So even today, if there is a supplier who is required to raise an e-invoice, meaning your supplier is above 100 crore, due to whatever reason, his software crashed, his software didn't work, his software guy fell ill, something else happened, he could not get it in time, but he continues supplying goods to you. And he says, invoice I will issue later. Bear in mind, till he issues an e-invoice to you, you can't take a credit. Or even if you take a credit, that will be a provisional credit. The second is to ensure that the e-invoice that you receive from a vendor is a valid e-invoice. And that is why I said some kind of software which scans the barcode and checks whether it is valid, invalid, becomes very, very necessary. Several of these activities will be handled by the procurement teams. Some of them will be handled by the distribution and dispatch teams on the output side. Some of them will be handled by the finance, accounts, and tax teams in different organizations. But the need of the hour is to recognize that e-invoicing is there at present, and e-invoice is going to become more and more rampant in future. Therefore, it makes sense to be prepared. What else has happened as far as e-invoicing is concerned? So one of the key things that we are expecting in future is that possibly the e-way bill API interface will happen. At some point of time, the e-way bill may get abolished also. So the e-way bill may get replaced by an e-invoice, because an e-invoice largely serves the same purpose. And if a few more fields are integrated into the e-invoice, we can do away with the e-way bill in future. There is also a big demand from everybody, because as I understand, every organization, whether it is large corporates, small corporates, etc., is heavily dependent on Excel. And therefore, we have a request from all stakeholders that whatever is provided should be on an offline Excel utility. And everything should be converted to be permitted to be downloaded in an Excel form, not in an XML or HTML or anything of that kind. There is also a proposal underway that whenever you have a big business which is dependent on several small businesses, the big businesses will be permitted to allow their suppliers and clients to use their ERP. This is already happening, I guess, in some ways. So many of the online resellers, many of the online marketplaces actually go one step ahead and ensure that all their vendors use their same software to generate e-invoices. This possibly will become more and more in future. These are some of the things that we have to bear in mind as far as e-invoicing is concerned. I'm just moving ahead in the interest of time because we don't have much time left for today's session. As I said at the beginning, reconciliations are going to become a very significant and fundamental part of all that we do. Many of us who are chartered accountants, cost accountants, MBAs, etc., will be familiar with reconciliations because that's what we do for month-end closing. That's what we do for quarterly closing. That's what we do when we have a statutory audit. So at various points of time, we keep doing various kinds of reconciliation. But what are the kind of reconciliations that we are talking of now? We are talking of several reconciliations which I have listed down in respect of the outward supplies. So whenever we make an outward supply to a customer, which is normally referred to as a sales invoice or a supply invoice, the job does not end by making an outward supply through an e-invoice. The job starts there. Subsequent to that, there are several reconciliations that we have to do in order to ensure that we are compliant. I have listed down some of them that came to my mind. When we look at inward supplies or input tax credit, there are again significant reconciliations that we need to do. For instance, what is the ITC availed as per books and what is the ITC availed as per returns? This was done when we were preparing 9 and 9C for 17-18 and for 18-19. And right now, as we speak, for 19-20, the timeline for 9 and 9C is the end of February, unless it is extended further. So many of you may already be working on 9 and 9C for 19-20 as well. So when you do 19-20, you will be looking at various input tax credit related GL codes and see how they are reflected in the GST returns. And that has to be reconciled. Similarly, if we have taken GST, if we have taken input tax credit in a particular month, but we have accounted for it possibly 2 months down the line, there again, there is a need to make a reconciliation. The rules relating to availments of credits on inputs, input services, capital goods are different. And therefore, we need to bifurcate the ITC on those three and ensure that all three are segregated. So for instance, when it comes to refunds for service providers, they are permitted refunds of input services. They are not permitted refunds on capital goods. And therefore, capital goods ITC needs to be segregated in their case. So several reconciliations in respect of input tax credit would also help in ensuring that the returns that are filed are accurate. There is a need to have some reconciliations on a reverse charge basis. Whatever are the reverse charge entries, we have fortunately not seen too much of an expansion on reverse charge after GST started. But possibly at some point of time in future, we'll see more and more of reverse charge happening, because reverse charge is a very simple way for the government to collect tax. So when we have reverse charge, we need to do more reconciliations in order to ensure that the reverse charge that we have paid and the ITC that we have claimed on that reverse charge are exactly corresponding to each other. Coming to my final section in respect of some of the recent GST updates, which are all ITC related. These were some of the amendments that we saw happening with effect from 1st January 2021. Some of them you would be aware. I'm just running through it so that we are on the same page when it comes to GST returns. There is a restriction on availment of ITC, which earlier was 20%, then was brought to 10%. Now it is just 5%. Now, what does it signify? To me, it signifies that in future, we will be permitted to avail ITC only to the extent it is matched. Even 105% may go away, it may only be 100%. There is also now a need of a mandatory one payment of GST in cash for specified taxpayers. So even if you are providing export of services, even if you don't need to pay any amount in tax, you still need to pay 1% as tax. As I said before, suspension and cancellation of GST registration has started in the last 2 months or so. This was not existing earlier. Incidentally, the GST authorities have been visiting various premises to ascertain whether business is carried out in those premises. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, various companies have closed down their premises due to the lockdown, and people are working from home. So in addition to work from home, we now also have work from anywhere. And many employers permit work from home and work from anywhere. Consequently, there is nobody in the office. And some of the GST authorities who are visiting premises are coming to the conclusion that the premises is unoccupied and therefore there is no business going on. We need to be very cautious in that case and convince the authorities that it is on a work from home or work from anywhere. And it is not that the entity does not exist or the operations are not there. If ITC is matched with GSTR 2A and 2B, then you can avail the entire ITC. But if there is an unmatched ITC, then we can only get 5% of the credit, as I mentioned earlier. In terms of applicability, just bear in mind that the reduced ITC benefit is effective or as already effective from 1st of January. Utilization of ITC is also restricted. So now 1% has to be paid in cash, which means only 99% can be utilized. For utilization of ITC, the newly inserted provision, if you have noticed, has overriding provision on all the other sections. So that can't even be challenged in a court of law. There are a few exceptions that have been carved out to the restriction on ITC utilization. If you look at this, many of the carve-outs may not be applicable to most of us unless it's a government department, PSU, local authority or something, or the value involved is very, very small. In most of the cases that I have seen, typically, some of the exceptions that have been carved out are not applicable. So I think we are exactly on 5 o'clock now, which to me seems that we are on time. So thank you, everyone. I wish we had some time for Q&A today. As I had informed Bengal Chamber, I have to get onto another call. But if you have any questions that you would like to share through an email with Bengal Chamber or on a chat box with them, I'm happy to address them at a subsequent point of time. So Sharbani, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mani. We request you also to share your presentation so that we may share it with the participants also.
I will certainly do that. I will certainly do that.
Okay, thank you, sir. And I now request Mr. T.B. Chatterjee to take the next session forward on GST auditing.
Okay. Thank you, Mani sir, for your
yes, sir, auditing and litigation.
For your detailed views on the new GST return, on the e-invoicing concept, etc. Now I'll be discussing today the audit part. You will agree that we have completed nearly 3 years from July 17 to July 20 tax periods under GST law. Now we are ready to face new chapter in GST law, that is audit notices from the CGST and SGST officers under section 65 of the CGST Act. So I am trying to share my knowledge in audit under CGST law 2017. Now if you see that there are two types of audits. One is the specific audit, another is special audit. Now, first we'll discuss about the specific audit. Now, as per section 65(1) of the CGST Act, the commissioner or any officer authorized by him by way of a general or a specific order may undertake of any registered person for such period which will think necessary and at such frequency as may be prescribed in the justifications. And it will be on a financial year basis. Say for example 2017-18, 2018-19, and it will not cross or overlap between two different financial years. Now, what audit means? For the purpose of departmental audit, it means verification or examination of records and returns and other relevant documents as may be considered by the department or as may be furnished by the registered person under the Act or the rules made thereunder. His basic object to see two things: whether correct turnover has been reported and whether proper input tax credit has been taken. That means the input tax which are eligible to take credit, whether it has been taken, now block credit has been taken, and whether the turnover. These are the two important things. If you see from the GST point of view, these are the two informations which will help the tax officer to understand whether GST payment has been made properly or not. So, turnover reconciliations and ITC reconciliation is very important. Now, what do you mean by reconciliation? That is very important. You have always to think from the tax officer's point of view. You have reported a turnover in 3B. You have reported a turnover in GSTR 1. To what extent it tallies with the reported turnover in your annual report? This is more important. You will find whenever you will get a notice from the department for the purpose of audit, they will specifically stress on these reconciliation. From our accounting experience, we find there are areas of differences for which you have to be very cautious and keep the reconciliation ready. Like 9 versus the 3B returns. Now, In 3B, you consider branch transfer also. Whereas in case of audited accounts, branch transfers are not considered as turnover. So you have to start from your reported turnover shown in the annual accounts and audited accounts with the respective 3B. This is a very, very important. If there is any difference between the two, obviously there could be a question of additional duty liability. Now I will tell you one more area where differences could be there. Your reconciliation with the turnover shown in the director's report. Many companies in the director's report on operational profit area, they start with revenue. And that revenue and the revenue shown in your 3B or 9 might differ due to some logical reasons. As a prudent taxpayer, you should try to keep the reconciliation ready between turnover as per audited accounts and the 3B and 9 and the turnover shown in director's report and 3B and 9. And there are areas for which there could be differences. Next is that other income. Very important thing. I am telling you in advance, these are the areas you will find the problem. And being worked for a long time in corporate, I know this could be the areas. In other income, we show scrap sale, interest payment, interest received, and many other miscellaneous income. Now, in those cases, we may not charge GST. The tax department will go and find out that give me the total list of other income. And he will try to relate with your turnover. He will try to relate with your GST return. So therefore, it is not that you are only going for reconciliation with the turnover. You should also see that what is the other income, and out of the total other income, how much is relevant to GST taxable supply. So therefore, these two areas are very, very important for the purpose of keeping yourself ready for GST audit. Next is the exemption and deductions claimed. Many companies have exempted goods, partially exempted, partially taxable, supplies to the exports. Department will look into only those areas where they could expect some amount of revenue leakage. So, if you have claimed something which is not allowed under exemption, obviously there could be a question of dispute. Similarly, ITC is a very, very important area. ITC register should be linked with the purchase register. And it is a fact that ITC as per purchase register should always be more normally the ITC which you have claimed in 3B. Because many ITCs are not available as credit. So in 3B return, we cannot take credit for all the ITCs. Now, what is the total tax paid by you through purchases or inputs in respect of goods, services, or anything, and how much amount you have taken credit in 3B? What is the difference between the two? One thing I just want to tell you very frankly, then in GST, the most important job is reconciliation. It is reconciliation. Second important part is reconciliation. And third important part is reconciliations. Unless you reconcile your certain areas of functions, you might be in trouble. So these are my advanced indications that while turnover has to be reconciled with audited annual records, ITC should also be kept ready. Reconciliation should be kept ready. We should link with your purchases, which should link with your branch transfer in. So like that, this is a very important area. There will be a differences, and why the differences are there, that has to be very important. Another area of differences between the supply value as per your EOA bill and supply value as per your turnover. This reconciliation is very important. For many supplies, we use the EOA bill, but such supply is not considered as turnover. So therefore, for example, you are giving materials to the job worker. Whenever material is transported, then obviously there could be a EOA bill. But that does not come under our turnover. So there will always be a difference between the supply value as per EOA bill and the supply shown in your audited accounts. Many companies now started doing these reconciliations. Now 3B versus EOA bill. That is another area of these things. Next part is this you should always keep ready on a yearly basis, and not that only on receipt of the audit notice, because it takes a lot of time and department will give you only 15 days to supply those informations. So that is a problem. Next area is job work. Job work is a very tricky area. ITC 04 reconciliation is very important. You are supplying the goods to the job worker without charging any duty. So therefore, obviously, the department will be, and it is all taxable goods which you are sending to the job worker. They always feel, or they may have some doubt, that materials are going out without payment of duty. It is going to the job worker, and materials are sold from the job worker's premises without any invoice. So therefore, they would like to check what material has gone and what material has come back. So therefore, you should have a very standardized, established input-output ratio, so that you can establish that the raw materials or components or consumables which you have sent to the job worker have either come back within a period of 1 year, or it is lying with the job worker which is below 1 year. A reconciliations of ITC 04 job work wise means if there are 100 job workers input output ratio. And with that input output ratio, you should be able to reconcile. If it is a chemical industry, very, very important, then you have to see how much amount of materials are lying with the job worker at any moment of time, so that department can know that how much is duty or not paid but lying with the job worker. This is a very tricky area and most important area. I will tell you, these are the three major areas which you have to look into. Without getting yourself fully prepared in turnover, ITC and ITC 04, then it will be very difficult to face the audit. Each and every supply challan should be reconciled, because through this document, you transfer goods without payment of duty. So the moment the department people will come or ask, they will say, give me the total list of supply challan. And based on that, they will go on verification to see whether it is really as per GST law or not. Then another area is the HS code. You must be very sure what HS code you are assigning in respect of your output supplies, and also in respect of inputs which you are procuring from your vendors. Whether the HS code is proper, that verification has to be made. So in my case, what we do, we try to have a vendor's profile. So when any vendor is selected, the company should have a proper system to see what materials are coming from the vendor and what is the exact HS classification of that material. No such regulations are there in the GST law. But if you are a prudent taxpayer, you should take precautions in these two. One, vendor's profile to be kept ready. Whenever any new vendor comes, the HS code has to be verified and checked by the company, so that after some time they do not face any problem. At the same time, when they are selling to the customer, customer's profile is also there, master datas are also there, and their HS code. If the company has got 10 different items and 10 different HS code, that HS code has to be there in your master, so that while you are selling, you are basically specifying the correct HS code. At the same time, when you are buying the raw material, you get it. So this HS code verification should be done in respect of any new customer or any new vendor. Now, one area we are facing today, that refund. Many of our clients have taken refund, but sometimes it happens they have availed more refund than what they are entitled. For example, there was some dispute about the availability of refund in respect of input services at the initial stage. Now they have, although these clarifications and notifications and changing of rule law, according to me, is not correct. But at present, the rule says that for refund of duty, GST refund will be applicable only in respect of goods and not for services or not even for capital goods. So we find many clients, many people, many companies have claimed GST refund and they have got the refund also. So the department is now issuing so-called notice, circular, everything to get the money back from the client, from the SSC. Here, most important point is that if you find that the GST refund was received in excess, you should not think twice to make the payment. But at the same time, ensure that you get back the credit directly in your register, in the GST register. So the department has to issue necessary directions so that the duty which you had debited at the time of claiming the refund is received back. This is one area. So refund claim is a very important area. You can recheck whether your refunds are correctly made or not, or if you find out of your own that there is some problem in the reconciliation. From reconciliation, if you find that you have taken some excess credit or excess refund, please on your own revert it. Although GST law has set cash book also another area of that verifications. Although I do not find any justification, probably this cash book word is mentioned everywhere, but we know the cash book is a book where recording of all cash or bank transactions are made. Through cash transactions, what is the issue? They would like to see whether you have received any miscellaneous income by cash or by check, and whether it has been shown as a taxable sales or taxable supply or taxable services. They would like to go for this cross-checking. Inward supply of goods services, that is very important. It should not be, the fake invoice definitions has already been given by Mr. Mani and made it very clear that fake invoice means invoice against which no supply of goods or services have been made. So in respect of goods, you can identify with GST, GRN, goods received note, stock register, consumption register, etc. But services is very difficult. There is no recording of services received. So therefore, this has to be checked properly that the service credit which has been taken, whether it is proper, whether it is it doesn't come under a reverse charge mechanism, all these details, all these verifications has to be made. In fact, although it is not specifically stated in the 9C report of the auditor, but as an auditor, at least we are doing that to review this area before coming for 9C. Now, as I have told, the department has right to verify the correctness of the informations which you have submitted in 3B, in GSTR 1, ITC 04, or GSTR 06, 9, 9C, etc. They have the inherent power. So therefore, any information given in these returns or in these reports, they can verify each and every item with your consolidated records. Apart from that, your bank account, bank details, everything is there. E-way bill reference is very important, as I have already explained. Apart from that, there are other documents they might ask for GST registration certificate, like principal place of business.
Sir, please unmute yourself. Sir?
Hello?
হ্যাঁ স্যার শোনা যাচ্ছে এবার।
Acha. Now it's okay now?
Yes sir.
Trial balance for the audit period, etc. Trial balance has nothing to do because trial balance will always tally with the general ledger. It cannot be that general ledger is separate and trial balance is separate. So therefore, these are the documents are very, very important. Now the question is that what are the procedures they follow? In GST, everything is regulated by a specific format and on an online basis. So in GST, they will give you audit 1 for the purpose of whenever you get this format audit 1, audit 01, then you will feel that your item or your entire reporting is now subject to verification on audit. And they will give you a 15 days notice to come out with the details. I have seen this audit notice, and they give the complete details, whatever is there in section 65 of the CGST Act. So you will find what are the informations are relevant to your business. Based on that, you will prepare the document. That is why I'm telling you 15 days notice is nothing. So therefore, until and unless you keep your reconciliations ready, then it is very difficult for you to meet that time target. So therefore, it will be our suggestions that on a yearly basis, particularly at the time of filing GSTR 9 and GSTR 9C, you should all simultaneously keep those reconciliations which I have just referred to you in respect of the turnover, in respect of ITC, and in respect of the job work services. These are the three important areas without which you cannot really move. And they will intimate if there is any differences, they will intimate the findings to the registered person on conclusion of the audit in audit 2, AUT-02. So through audit 1, they will ask you to provide the details, and the audit has to be completed within 90 days. That means within 3 months. It is not that it can continue for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. No. There is a specific period they have to complete within 90 days from the date of submissions of your all documents. So therefore, meter will run once you submit the all submissions. It is not that these 90 days will be calculated from the date of issuing notice or from the within 15 days. So once 15 days are over, then 90 days will count. No, it will be counted only after you submit your all documents to the satisfaction of the tax officer. So these are all about the specific audit. These audits have already started in a very large scale. Hopefully you will get your notice very soon. Of course, they will go on a risk assessment basis. Wherever they feel that there is a risky assessee, risky dealer, then obviously they will go for the audit part. Now, apart from this specific audit, there is one more audit is there that is called special audit. Now, we have encountered this special audit scheme in the our erstwhile excise law and service tax law. Chartered accountant and cost accountants are authorized to do special audit. Now the question is that where the special audit is expected to be announced. You can also vouch it. I can tell you some idea. You see, you yourself compare what is the amount of ITC you are claiming and what is the output tax. What is the gap between the two? If the gap is quite healthy, say 10-20%, then I don't think it is a very risky assessing until and unless somebody is involved with fraud or something like that. I'm not talking about, I'm talking about general assessing. According to me, although it is to be tested, they will try to find out why particularly in the cases where the ITC claim is very high or ITC is more than the output tax. There is the question. So it is better to see, I have seen particularly in companies like many companies, particularly in the electronics area, goods are sold with a very small margin, even 1%, 1.5% to 2%. You will be very surprised to note that in some cases, or in 70-80% cases, the dealers sell the goods lower than the cost price, higher than the cost price. Seller is selling 100 rupees and his cost is 102, 103. So his cost price is more. They are selling at a lower price. Now question is that how this business is tenable? Since we have a lot of clients in this area, this because tenable is that how their price is fixed. They have sold, say for example, the main manufacturer has sold goods at 100 rupees to its dealers. Now at what price dealer will sell, that depends on today. And they will go on declaring various bonuses, etc. They means the manufacturer. So they decide that today it should be sold at 98 rupees. The dealer has to sell at 98 rupees, although he has purchased at 100 rupees. Now question is, what is his profit? His profit is that after few days, they will be given a credit note for incentive or something like that. So if you compare with cost versus sale value, there would be a mismatch. Until and unless you take the incentive also within the incentive or discount, whatever you call it, it is considered there. So this is another area where the threat is there. So you have to understand what is the margin you are making. Ultimately, GST is the tax on the margin, on the value additions. If I buy it at 100 rupees and sell it at 90, there will be a negative value additions. Or if I buy at 100 rupees and sell at 101 rupees, there could be hardly any value additions. Those industries, they should be very careful and keep the things ready. They can establish it through their annual report that what is the margin they have in this particular market. In certain industries, I know that I have discussed with you, maybe it is there in many other industries also, where the trading margin is very thin, and there could be some issues with regard to these things. Then special audit can be declared where the department feels that your turnovers are not proper, there is a huge mismatch, or anti-evasion department has given any confidential or intelligence report about about either fake invoice or anything like that. So based on that, the audit has to be announced. This has to be approved by the commissioner. So it is not that any GST officer or departmental officer can declare this special audit. They have to take the specific approval with cause of action from the commissioner. Once they get the approval, then special audit has to be announced, and special audit has to be communicated to the client with specifically stating that who is the special auditor. As I have already explained, that special auditor could be chartered accountant and cost accountant. I just want to share with you that about 10-15 days back, the GST authority has requested all the practitioners to apply for to work as a special auditor. So you have to enroll your name, you have to register with the GST authority, and those auditors will be appointed at the cost of the department. So it is not an additional cost to the SSE. It is a cost to the GST authority who will bear the entire cost. So regarding the specific audit, special audit, we have to see how it works. I have not yet encountered any special audit case so far, but this would definitely take its shapes in the long run, hopefully. These are the two audits are very, very important. One more area I would like to say about Section 83 of the CGST Act. This is very, very important to know that CGST Act in the GST law, there is an enabling provisions that if the department feels that there could be some amount of evasions, it is their feeling, not established by any order or any demand notice like that. If they foresee that there could be some revenue leakage and the SSE may not be available or fly by nights, then based on their thinking and feeling, they have the right to attach your bank accounts. Normally, from our experience and the Income Tax Act or previous laws, attachment could be made only in case where the demand is crystallized, where the order is there supported by demand, and the demand is there, there is no dispute in the demand. Only in those cases, in case of non-receipt of the payment, the department can attach your accounts. But it is only GST, Section 83, you can have a look. There they have the power to provisionally attach your bank account just on the feeling that you could run off or there is a huge amount of leakage. So they have huge power. In fact, we find a lot of people are getting intelligence report orders from the Delhi asking to appear by way of a summon they are issuing. So these have already started, the litigation part has already started. So as a prudent taxpayer, we have to be ready that these are the provisions and we should take certain precautions, certain actions in advance so that if we face any sort of audit, whether it is a specific audit or special audit, we can confidently handle those issues. And these are all about the audit part, which I wanted to share with all of you. If you have any question, fine. Otherwise, I will revert back to Sarvani. Sarvani, are you with us?
Any questions, please? Yes. Sir, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, I can hear you.
Any questions? Okay, any questions? Please unmute yourself and ask the questions. Or raise your hands.
I don't think there is any question. So you can wrap up the whole program.
Okay, sir. Thank you all for joining today's session. We will share the link and the presentation with you over the email ID you have forwarded it to us. And if you have any other further questions on these topics, please mail it to us. We will reply back accordingly.
Thank you.
So we are closing the session. We are closing the session for today. Thank you, sir, for joining and guiding us in organizing the session. And thank you, Mr. Mani, too. And thank you all the participants. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
সিগন্যাল হচ্ছে যখন প্রথম যখন বোঝাচ্ছিল তখন একটা জিনিস বলছিল এই যে স্পিডোস যেমন ইনভেস্ট করতে